Have you ever been watching an episode of the podcast and wondered what's in the mug? Well, we're really proud to be partnering with the amazing folks at Azahar Roast House, located right here in Lowville, New York. Azahar Roast House is a family and community-focused coffee roaster bringing you green coffee exclusively from Colombia. And get this, they always have freshly roasted coffee ready to ship directly to your door. You can order now using the link below and in the description. Be sure to check out their subscription page and have amazing coffee automatically shipped to you every month. Again, that's Azahar Roast House, where coffee meets community and growth, which is what this podcast is all about. To learn more, select the link in the description and order today. Chief Mello, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's good to see you again.
And the last time you and I were across the table was a little different feeling.
Okay. Is that when you left?
That was when I left,
Right,
yeah. And so it just kind of makes it full circle for me.
Right.
That was a hard thing for me to do. Yeah. I think it's important to let listeners know too, like the grace that you handled that with, and I really appreciated that for forever. And probably you would have never heard that if we wouldn't have been here. So
yeah, no, I appreciate that. You know, it's especially today when you look at the people coming on today, it's not like it was years ago where you took a job and that was your career and you just stayed there. For better or worse, you stayed there, right? That's what people did, some time ago. So we're great when I see people coming on today. You appreciate the time they spend with you, and then you're happy for them and you're proud that they're moving on to the next step. It may be in 4 or 5 years like yourself, or it may be 10, or it may be retirement. But,
right.
I always enjoy that. And in fact, it's interesting because I just had Brian Roger, who retired, and him and many like him have said to me, I'm going to stay here and, we're going to keep our team together. And I said, no, listen, you've got your time in and you need to think about the next step because
right.
You still have a lot of work life left. And so instead of trying to convince people to stay, I encourage them to do what is best for them and what is best for their family. And I'm kind of proud. It's a proud moment to see people kind of move on. So yeah.
A little bittersweet probably.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Bittersweet. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think that, and we're going to get into that too, about just your leadership style and some of that a little bit later on.
Okay.
I have a lot that I want to get to, but that is something that can be hard for people, especially when you invest in them.
Right.
And you see potential in them, and then they have to make a decision that's, for their own betterment or
Sure.
what, for their family or for whatever reason. So that must be hard.
Well, I think it is, but in some ways it's not, because you have to be resilient as an organization and you've got to be prepared. And it can't be, you can't just rely on whether it be me or you or anyone else, on one or two people. You've got to be strong. And you have to be grateful for, the people that you have. It's like, when you're playing on a team in school, you're not going to be together forever, but you appreciate the time that you have together. And so it's just great to see people graduate from school. And it's great to see people move on. And I truly mean that. I had one of my son's friends growing up with, he came on the PD, and he was another one that came down to me and he said, I said, you have 20 years on now. You have a pretty good pension, because we have a good pension in the city we work in. And I said, what are you going to do? He goes, I'm staying as long as you stay. I go, no, you're not. I said, you've got 2 young children. I said, I want you to think about the next steps. Mm. And he said, are you serious? I go, absolutely. I care about you. I'm proud of you. It's been great having you here for 20 years, but it's time to leave. It's time to go. Now, if he stayed, I would have been happy. I probably would have been happier personally, but in a way that's selfish.
Right.
So to see him, and he's doing really well. So.
Yeah. So it's just a big perspective thing.
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
Sure. If anybody is wondering why my voice sounds like this, I went to the Yankee game last night.
You did?
Are you
I'm
into
a big
sports?
Yankee fan.
Are you really?
Yeah,
Okay.
to see them come back like that, to see Judge, once again carry the team.
Yeah,
that was great.
So that is why it's actually that home run that got a little crazy in that place.
Nice.
So that's why if I sound raspy, everybody will know now at home.
All right, that's a good reason. I hope we do it. I hope we can do it again.
I know. Yeah, so that was on Tuesday night. So this will release probably Thursday, tomorrow, or the next day, Friday. So that way people kind of get an idea for the context. Yeah. I don't think I've ever been a part of a moment like that.
Yeah.
Where everybody was, you know how playoff games are.
Sure.
You know, I'm sure you've been to sporting playoff games.
Yeah.
Every single pitch matters. Every count matters.
Right.
So, of course, when Aaron Judge comes up to the bat, everybody's on their feet.
Sure.
And to see him do that, and I don't know how you hit that pitch.
Yeah.
100 miles an hour, like
great.
At your face almost. And that place absolutely lost it. So
that's great, especially when you're so close to elimination.
Oh, my
and you're
goodness.
down, and to see that go from here to here.
Right.
I mean, that's great.
You could start to feel it. Like that stadium's pretty special. Like in the playoffs, as soon as a little bit gets going, you can feel the momentum. Right. And then, man, when that ball hit the foul pole, I was actually sitting kind of upper behind home plate where I could see right down third base line. Oh, so I had a good nice view of it.
That was nice.
Yeah. So you watched the game?
Yeah. Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. Okay. No, I don't miss it. Yeah.
We Narowski and I, when we were working obviously together, we lived together. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know
we
that.
We were roommates.
Oh, that's right. No, I do remember this. Yeah.
And we used to go. He's a big Red Sox fan, so we would always just jump on the train and go, you know, when we could. And so a lot of good memories there. But enough about me and my lack of my voice. Tell us a little bit about your background, your growing up years. What did that look like for you?
Probably it's somewhat non-conventional. Probably not the story that you'd expect from most police chiefs. And I think most people will talk about, you know, why they got into law enforcement. It usually has to do with, you know, maybe in my day, adventure seekers, but most people wanted to, you know, work with people and I did all that. But my journey was a little bit different. I grew up in a rough city, and you know, my parents divorced when I was really young, and so my mom was a single mom, you know, raising four of us. And the experiences I had with police probably weren't the best. Although, you know, it's interesting because my grandparents had a lot of influence on me as well, and they were all about respect. And, you know, it's just like I'm a baby boomer, right? So we were taught to respect, you know, adults, respect authority, and we always did. And we just, but I had some, you know, some experience with police, and, you know, that weren't the best. And so I didn't naturally have that respect. And you know, my mom is a single mom, and, you know, my parents got divorced. My mom dated, and you know, I've seen abuse. I've gone through some stuff and seen some stuff. And, you know, I can think of 3-4 times where the police were called to our house, and, you know, you as a child, you know, I'm talking like 7 years old, 6 years old, and you're thinking the police are going to come to your house and they're going to protect your mom, and in some cases protect me and my brothers. And when I got to that, just didn't happen. And, you know, we didn't handle domestics the way we handle them now. Yeah. And I just remember them leaving, and it just, so it kind of shook me, and it kind of stayed with me. And so I never really saw the police as protectors or that hero, you know, riding up on the horse. I think a lot of kids, you know, probably did. And you know, so we went through some of that, and that, you know, that was a while. So I just didn't have that strong impression of police as, you know, kind of the savior. When I got a little bit older, my father died. He was killed, actually, and I remember when I was about 16 years old, and I was just starting to drive, and I didn't really know what happened. My mom wouldn't, you know, my mom always said, when you get older and you're an adult, I'll tell you about it. But, you know, I didn't really know what happened. I always wanted to find out. And I had this idea that as soon as I was old enough, I was going to go to the city police department, find out what had happened. And I just remember going there and having a bad experience. Couldn't get the reports. Really? They said it didn't exist, which I now know that those things are held, you know, forever. So it did exist. And I remember this older guy, salty guy. I don't know what he was. He was a higher rank. He came down, and in the lobby, and he said something. I remember him saying something, something very, personal about my dad. And so he knew him. And that stuck with me. And I remember just leaving there thinking, you know what, I don't like these guys. I just didn't have, any appreciation. But that motivated me to do this job. And, there was where I lived, there was a state trooper down the street. And I remember he would come home, and we'd always play baseball on the street. We'd actually play tackle football on the street. Everything was in the street back then.
On the concrete?
Yeah, the concrete, yeah.
Okay.
And so, I was from Bridgeport, so we were pretty tough kids back then.
Yeah.
And so he would come home, and I would see him in this shiny, like a powder blue cruiser. It was like always shiny, always clean. He'd have his bar light with a bubble in the center and the two lights on the side, going back a ways. And he would get out of his car, and he had this crisp uniform on that the way he was a big guy and the way he carried himself. And he would throw me the football. I'd throw him the football, and he would say, go long. And, he'd throw it to me. I'd throw it back to him. And I just thought, no, this is what I want to be. Like, this is the guy that will keep people safe. Like, this is the hero. Mm-hmm. And so my vision started to change, and I thought, you know what? That's what I want to be. I want to be a police officer, but I'm going to be the kind of police officer that when I go to someone's house, that I'm going to protect kids, and I'm going to protect, women from abuse and some of those things, right? Mm-hmm. So that motivated me to just want to be better and to want to do this job. So it wasn't that I grow up always wanted to do this job. Right. It was that I thought I was, I'd grow up and I'd do it the right way, and I'd be better than those guys were. I'd be more like this particular, state police, this trooper. And so I committed myself at probably about 17 years old. I said, this is what I'm going to do. And, we didn't have a lot of money. We didn't have any money, and, paying for college was going to be tough. So I went into the military. I enlisted under the GI Bills because I knew I needed help paying for college, and I wanted to go to a good school. And so I did that. I went in as an MP because I said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a police officer. And I never wavered from that. I mean, it was just like, I was just driven to do that. And everything I did from that point on was to do, not necessarily what I'm doing now. I never thought about being a chief, but I thought about, being that guy that was going to protect other people. And you hear about the thin blue line, and I know that's kind of been hijacked, which is unfortunate, but like, I really believe in that. Like, get behind me and I'll protect you kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I believed in that when I was first started, and I believe in that just as much, maybe even more now. Yeah. So that's how I got started. Went through the military, got out, got married young. Had my first child pretty young as well, and young dad, and that was great. Tough, but it was great. And
right, yeah.
Got out and started school right away, and then got on Milford. Milford was the only department testing.
Okay. And
it was, it wasn't even my first choice. It just because I'm not from this city, and so I took that job, and it's never wavered. Just kept, and here I am, and it's been good to me, and I think I've been good to them. I had a pretty good career. I was a canine handler, and I got to spend 4 years in a task force, state task force, and doing some really, wonderful things I'm really proud of. Met some fantastic people. We did some really good work, and got to do that, and worked at the academy. I used to be the physical fitness instructor, and really enjoyed doing that.
It
and,
shows.
Always big on fitness and big on discipline. So I took a lot of what I learned in the military, and I translated that, carried that over to what we did at the academy, and that served me well. Went from there and got promoted. And went up through the ranks, ran the detective bureau for many years, and made lieutenant, made captain, and then never thought about really the next step. Never thought about what I was going to do with the next rank. Just always liked being, like Nick Saban will say, be where your feet are, and just love that. Loved every minute of it. And and then this position came up, and I met the qualifications since I applied. Never had any expectation I was going to be the chief. I expected the deputy chief would move up, and I would take the deputy chief's job. And then I got the job, and it's just been great. And
So you mentioned, going back a little bit, you mentioned not always having that kind of feeling that a lot of police officers have, right? So it's the the hero. They want to be the person that comes and helps and makes things better. That's why you call the police.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's usually on your worst day, which kind of, it takes a special kind of person that wants to be infused into that situation to help. And the fact that it didn't really generically go that way until, I guess you would have been in like your early teens, was it?
Early teens, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so fascinating. But then you kind of got to that right away to that place based on your past experiences, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
You often see, especially in like fatherhood, you hear a lot of fathers say, I'm going to be a better father than my father was to me or whatever. And it's kind of like the correlation to their own past is propelling them to something better.
Right.
And it seems like that's kind of, at least with your feeling on law enforcement, that's kind of how it related. So you didn't have the best experiences with law enforcement, and you wanted to be the better version of that for somebody else going through something difficult like you went through.
Yeah,
which is pretty special.
Absolutely. I'm proud of the fact that as a young kid, and I guess I was probably like around 15, 16 when it happened, I started to really think about, about other people, about like trying to put myself in their shoes, because it's like we all have trouble trying to empathize, and we try to, but we're all a subject of our own biases and our own imprinting and
Right.
upbringing,
Yeah.
and so it was a little easier for me, I think, to say, and it still is, and I especially when I was on in the field, when I see something happen, I'm thinking, well, you know what, I know what that's like. Like I've had some of those experiences, or known people that I've cared about that have had those experiences. And I think it makes you more relatable when you start to, you're not as quick to pass judgment.
Right.
And it's something I think it takes a while when you're a police officer to kind of learn that kind of empathy, to kind of always think when you make these assessments or assumptions that you try to look at the positive instead of the negative and try to kind of walk in their shoes, as difficult as it may be. I had that perspective, I think, early on. Yeah. And I think it served me well.
Yeah.
I tell you though, it's I don't. In fact, this is the first time I've ever even talked about this, other than just my close group of friends. But it motivated me then, and it still motivates me now. And it came up a lot, in 2020 and the hard times we went through. It caused me to kind of really say, okay, let me now look through even a different lens and try to understand.
That's a very interesting point, because when I was doing the oral board, of course, one of the hardest questions is always like, what's a weakness, right?
Yeah.
And I had to think about that for a minute, not because I'm anything great. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah, I get you.
But I had wondered if where I was raised, small town America, very little crime, big community, if I would have trouble relating and empathizing with people. So that was something that I had said that I would like to work on and see how I do with that. Right. Luckily, I'm a pretty empathetic person anyways.
Yeah.
So that kind of translated well, but that's so true. You don't know what people are going through.
You don't know. You don't know what kind of day they've had, what kind of life they've had. People are a product of their experiences. Yeah. And, and I tell people that all the time. And I say, listen, the judgments they're making on us, well, I disagree with most of them. I also understand that they're based upon whatever experiences, they may have,
right.
At some point in their life, or maybe continue to still have. So,
yeah. I can think of a lot of times where, being on the job, being on the road, and having somebody projecting through you to some other officer that had maybe mistreated them or had said something to that, whatever it may be, or their perception. And a lot of times feeling like, and telling my coworkers, like, they're not actually talking to me.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? That's not, the message isn't for me. It's for somebody who maybe hurt them in the past or experiences they had. So,
or, I can give you an example. I was on a call on a domestic, and I can barely remember what had happened. And we had to arrest the son, and the son just resisted. And there was two of us, and you know what it's like when you're using force. It never looks good. It's always ugly.
Right.
But we can't lose that. We're carrying weapons on us. We've taken somebody into custody. You got to take them into custody. It just never looks good, but it's necessary. It's kind of like surgery, right? You don't want to watch surgery. It doesn't look pretty, but it's necessary.
Yep.
So, and a few days went by, and I got sent to a call, and the same officer that was covering me in the earlier call showed up, and I was talking to this woman, And she was all upset, and she called the PD screaming and yelling about the police. And I went out there, and I'm trying to talk to her and calm her down. And she's telling me about this bad experience that she had with her family, with the police, and how the police were violent and used excessive force on her son.
Yeah.
And I'm listening to her, and I'm like, God, that's awful. I wonder if that really happened. And my partner said to me, she's talking about us. And I go,
Okay.
She is. Yeah, that was yesterday. Remember, that was her son. And she actually wasn't there. It was the brother and sister. Mm-hmm. But when this was repeated to her and how it was explained to her, and I thought, wow, how can, two things be true at once, right?
Right.
Here we are, thought, we did everything that we were supposed to do that was, proper for the circumstance. But her perception of that and the way we acted was completely different.
How do you deal with it? Yeah. How do you
deal with that?
That's tough.
But I've just accepted the fact that, there were some things that we're just never going to agree on. And there was just, we try to be empathetic and, try to walk in that person's shoes and show sympathy and compassion. We don't always get the same thing in return. And that's okay. And I don't think we should expect that.
Right.
People don't do our job. They don't know what it's like to have to physically fight with someone that doesn't want to be arrested or that is trying to escape. I mean, it just doesn't look good, right? It's not, we don't have the magic, formula and so I've accepted that. And I know there's some things, all we can do is explain our actions and make sure that our actions can withstand, official scrutiny.
Yeah.
But we have to accept the fact that some people are just never going to understand or agree. And I'm not going to say it's okay. It's just a reality.
Right. Yeah. In your opinion, does body camera must really help in that way to kind of sort out the he said, she said side of things when it comes to police involvement with the public? Because it does help to clear up some, gray area.
It does. And I'll tell you interesting about body cams. We were the first agency in our state to get body cams. And we got body cams when they weren't wireless. You wore a pair of glasses and it had a camera with this wire you had to string through your shirt.
Yep.
And we bought 6 of them. And the officers were like, no, we're not wearing these. We are not wearing these. This is, it's like you're spying on us, like you don't trust us. And the reason I got body cams was because we had an incident, similar incident to what I just had mentioned, where an officer was at a bar. He got called to a bar restaurant on somebody that had caused problems, and they wanted this person removed. It turns out he had started a fight with the management. He had started a fight with the bouncers, and he got pretty violent, broke the place up. So we get there, and I get a cell phone camera, and this is when they first put cell phones on cameras, so it was pretty grainy. And I get this snippet sent to me, and it's our officer fighting with this guy, and it looked terrible. And I said, "Oh, this is terrible. This is bad." And I called the officer in, and he said, "No, here's what really happened." Or IA called him in and said, "Here's what really happened." We went to the business. We got the videotape from the business, the video cameras. And when you saw the rest of it, and you saw what this officer had gone through and how he tried to de-escalate, when de-escalate wasn't even a popular subject,
right?
But he worked to de-escalate.
Yeah.
And how violent this person was. This officer did a great job, but we only saw the ugly part, which is what most people see when this gets in front of the media, right? You just see that small snippet, or whatever snippet fits whatever narrative. Mm-hmm. But when you look at the whole thing in its entirety, and it was at that point that I said, you know what, we've got to, and I knew about these body cams that the Axon was then Taser had, and I said, we got to get a hold of those, because I need to be able to protect officers, right? Mm-hmm. And defend officers. What I wasn't even thinking about at the time was, to be able to hold officers accountable for things that they did wrong. Like, that didn't even enter into my calculus, but it is an important part, right? It's important that if we do have officers, because we know, look, there's some great police officers, some of the finest people in the world that I've ever met, but not all of them. And while we can always do better, some just don't belong in law enforcement, but it's such a small number.
Right.
And so it's nice to know that we can hold officers accountable. It's nice that they know that there's this accountability system. I think it keeps them sharp. But more importantly, it transcends everything else, is that officers do really great work. and they get accused and they get complaints from people that either, have an axe to grind, but often just have a different perspective, like I had mentioned earlier. And to be able to look at its entirety and to be able to tell, folks, especially, here's what happens, Brock. People come in and we see them at their worst. They're emotional. And their judgment has been colored. Their perspective has often been colored by those emotions. They come in days later and they make a complaint. And one of the things that we found is that when you show them the actual video and they see what the officers did or didn't do, and they see themselves in a way that they can't even, it's not even in their head, right? Because their perspective was clouded by emotion. We often get apologies, or the end of the conversation is over. And usually at the end, well, they'll try to justify it, but you can see that they realize, hey, I was out of line, and maybe the officer's conduct wasn't what I thought it was. Because very often, what we find is it's either highly exaggerated, maybe based on that false perception, or it's just completely inaccurate. And I think it's important because before you'd make a complaint against an officer and and people would complain because there's no evidence to support you there's no evidence to say the officer did anything wrong, but it's always out there. It hangs over the officer's head.
Right.
Now we can vindicate these officers and say that just didn't happen, or what that officer did was by policy. It was that officer's training, and it was legal. It was appropriate. So I think they're great for transparency, to let the public know, because don't forget, when somebody makes a complaint or an accusation, it isn't just between that complainant and that officer, especially with social media. The public cares about that.
Right.
And they've seen that snippet, and they have a right to know. They deserve to know. We want them to know, no, here's what really happened. I can't wait to release the entire video to show folks. Unfortunately, it doesn't have the legs that it once had when it was initially released, but I think they're great. We worked hard to outfit our whole department. We were one of the first agencies to mandate it. It's mandated throughout the whole state. I think are great. And, our officers, they won't go out without, they have to have one, but they love them.
Right.
Because they have found out what I always believed, that it was going to show, it was the way to document the good work that they do.
Yeah. That's how I felt.
Yeah.
Like whenever I had it, people would always ask me, because I think I came on in I was hired in 2016. And I'm not sure how long you guys had them in before that. We were on Axon by then, so it must have been a little while.
Yeah.
But there was people at the department who had done both at the time, older officers who had policed without them and with them. And a lot of people and my friends would ask, what do you think about that? And I'm like, I love it.
Yeah.
Because it keeps you accountable.
Sure.
As it should.
Right.
And it also helps to, back you up if you need it.
Absolutely.
So,
and it, you know what? It provides real good evidence for the case.
mm-hmm.
It makes for good, strong cases. One of the things that we're faced with now is, the idea behind body cams and the legislation in 2020 about body cams, it was all on this belief that we need every officer to have a body cam to see whether they're acting in a way that's discriminatory, or to see if they're acting excessively when they're using force. It was never to spy on officers. What we're seeing now is more and more people are complaining because officers, they'll have that interaction with the public and then they'll walk away and they'll have discussions with their supervisor or discussions with other officers. And the belief is, well, that's not right. They're covering something. And what I tell people is, you don't get the right to spy on police officers. You don't need to hear their private conversations. What you need to do is see, and you have a right to see what their interaction is with the public, to make sure that if somebody's consenting to a search, that it's a legal consent, to make sure if they're using force. You can look at their behavior in that interaction, but you don't get to spy on them. And so we're starting to see some of that, but we're pushing back on that.
All right, let's go back a little bit.
Sure.
So you started as a patrol officer in 1981.
Yes.
I was minus 10 years old. Not to date you. I don't mean to date you.
No, that's okay. Believe me, I'm dated. I get it. I'm constantly reminded of it.
How long was it before you were a canine handler? Because that's like a pretty different role.
I was on about 2 years.
Okay.
It was pretty quick. We had canines years ago, and they just started this new program, and they were going to add 4 canines. And I was selected, and I was surprised. I hadn't been on that long, and And back then, now they get these dogs and they pay big money for these dogs, and these dogs are, they come partially trained. My dog came from from some animal control as a stray dog, and it was a white shepherd.
No way.
Yeah, and I remember going to pick him up, and they had a muzzle on him, and I'm like, oh, this isn't going to work out. So I brought him home, and I put him in the basement because I had to go to work, and I left a note, or maybe I called my wife and it said, "Don't open the basement door." So she goes over to the basement door because she loves animals and opens the door, and he's just growling and so I called her. We didn't have cell phones back then. I called her. I said, "How's it going?" I think this dog isn't going to work out. The dog's vicious. And I go, "No, he'll be fine. He just needs to be trained." I came home I worked 4 to 12. I came home at midnight or 11 o'clock, and the dog is in the living room and she's petting the dog. No I don't know what she did. She obviously didn't follow,
She's
my advice.
She's a dog whisperer.
Yeah, your dog whisperer. And what a great dog he turned out to be. I don't know what his background is, but it was a great experience. And I did some really good work with him. And as a young patrol officer, I got to go to calls that I never would go to.
Right.
And the city was really busy. There was a lot going on. So really enjoyed that. One of the highlights of my career.
Yeah, I feel like canine officers in particular are usually called for a little bit more intense things, tracks, and
right.
Maybe higher intensity calls and stuff like that. But very different. 2 years, that's not long.
Not long at all.
That's
especially
not
the way the
experience.
department was based all on seniority back then.
Okay.
And who knows why they
did that rub some guys the wrong way?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure.
Because you have to remember, I was always the youngest person to get everything I ever did. So I always had to deal with that where, there wasn't a lot of turnover back then. I know when I took the test, for 4 openings, there were 1,000 applicants. And so they didn't hire back then. There wasn't a lot of opportunities, and so they were few and far between.
And you don't leave those jobs. Like once you get one,
you don't want to leave those jobs,
yeah,
right? And the union, the guys were of the ilk that, hey, everything's got to be based on seniority. Mm-hmm. And the chief at the time was about, we're going to start to look at more merit based, and it didn't go over well, but
no, I'm sure
I survived it.
You made it. So then you start to move. How long was it before you were promoted after that?
So the way it worked is if you came out 1 or 2 on the sergeant's list, you got to spend a summer in the detective bureau. Now, the only way to get in the detective bureau is you had to be the most senior person. It was all by seniority, and people stayed 30 some odd years back then. So I was able to get a summer relief job and get transferred to the detective bureau for the summer because I came out 1 or 2 on the sergeant's list, and had a great experience there. And I jumped on this burglary ring and solved this big long string of commercial burglaries and recovered a bunch of evidence and worked on that for a whole summer. And so for whatever reason, they said, we're going to extend you and keep you there. So I got to stay there until I made sergeant. And when I made sergeant, I had actually done this proposal that I thought, look, we haven't been involved in a drug task force in years. And remember, this is mid 80s now. And there was a lot going on in terms of, narcotics. And so I did this proposal to say, why don't we send a task force officer to the only game in town, which was this state task force. And they were doing some really good things. And so I made sergeant, and about 30 days later, I got called down to the chief's office. And back then, you never got called to you just never,
yeah.
You saw him once and that was it. And he said, I'm sending you to this task force as a supervisor. And I'm like, wow, that's great. And I thought, gee, I'm the first sergeant they made in years, and every sergeant's been on, most of them twice as, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times longer than me. This isn't going to go over well.
Yeah.
And it didn't.
And you have to, not only is it just a promotion, like now you're in a leadership role over those people.
Right.
Which is a really tough dynamic.
Yeah, it was. And, I had a good relationship with everybody. We were all friendly, and it was just a good team to be a part of. And I just, I love working with those guys, missed a lot of those guys. Many of those guys have passed. And, but then I went to the task force, and I spent about 4 years there, about 3.5 years working in a task force, doing like 80, 90 hours a week. We were doing wiretaps, and we did some really good stuff, and, stuff that you could Google and find today, like some really great stuff. And So I stayed there until I made lieutenant, and then came back.
Okay, so let's see if my timeline is right. Sergeant in 1988. I've done my research.
Yeah, you have.
And ChatGPT makes everything easy nowadays.
Yeah, because I don't even remember that. So.
Okay, then to lieutenant, then to captain. I'm interested to know your what it was like to go from patrol to 2 years to the dog, to canine. That's fast. Yeah. And then if I do my math again here, so within 7 years you're a sergeant. Does that sound about right?
From 7 years from the day I came on. I think it was like 6.5. Yeah, right around there. Okay. Yeah.
So was that something that you had always kind of envisioned doing, kind of moving up the ranks, or not?
I actually didn't. Like, I always enjoyed everything that I had, and I always try to put everything into what I did. And I would have been happy staying where I was. But I tell you a quick story. There was a guy that had been around for a long time, and I wasn't much to complain. But whatever happened this particular day, I wasn't happy. And we used to meet in the beginning of the shift for coffee, and whatever beat, the two adjoining beats would meet for coffee. And so this senior officer said, "Kid, you pick up, I'll take I don't know, whatever. I don't even drink coffee, but I wasn't going to say no."
Right.
So I pick up coffee, and he takes his Dunkin' Donuts and he puts it on the door frame, and he opens up the top, and he's drinking his, and I'm complaining about something, and I don't know what it was. Well, we get 15 minutes for the coffee break. Back then, they used to time it.
Okay.
And I look over, and as I'm talking, he puts the cover back on the coffee, and he reaches over, and he puts the car in drive, and I go, "Where are you going?" He said, "I've listened to you complain now for 10 minutes. If you think you can do a better job, study real hard, get yourself promoted, and then you can make those decisions. But remember this, when you do, they'll be complaining about you." And I never forgot that. But I thought about it, and I said, you know what? I do want to be the guy making those decisions. So when it came up, whenever a position came up, I put in for it, and I worked hard, but I never really focused on the next thing. I just focused on where I was. And honestly, if I hadn't gone any further than some of these things, I would have been fine. But wow. I was never going to let an opportunity go by. But I didn't let the ambition, overwhelm me.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, because then you kind of, the reason why you're doing things, the motivation is different, because I think a lot of people in leadership, I guess you would call it more toxic kind of leadership, is doing it for the power,
right?
Is doing it for the authority over other people. It's it's a little bit of narcissism.
It is.
Probably
it's selfish. It's
psychosis.
Yeah, right.
I
didn't become a police officer, for that reason. And I wasn't looking to get promoted for any of those reasons, right? I had things I wanted to do and still want to do.
Yeah. So, that's a big jump in any profession, in any business, in any career, to go from the lead to the leader. Mm-hmm. And did you have any philosophies, or was it just kind of a on the go learn leadership? Because the axioms for leadership now are so far ranging. You could find 1 million books on it tomorrow, and it's hard. And to find out where you fit in that can be a process. Yeah.
It's interesting because I don't really like the whole idea of you got to have a certain title, a certain style of leadership. And, we've all put labels on them, and then people try to blend the labels. And so I'm not into the labels. I've always, when I first started, I wanted people to, I just thought more about people as human beings. And I thought about them as, moms and dads and, brothers and sisters. I didn't want people focusing so much on what happened at work, except during work. I didn't want them, I listened to people for a long time talk about taking things home with them. And then, we'd go to like barbecues, and their wives and their families, knew everything that happened. And I thought, what, if I'm going to make sergeant, and then when I made lieutenant, it's going to be different. We're going to focus on work. We're going to have high expectations, but we're not taking this home. There are more important things to do at home than to be talking about, the memo you got or the assignment you got. So, I've read all the books, I've gone to all the seminars and I've learned from so many. When I went to school, I had some, some lectures from some, CEOs of some massive, major companies. And so I believe in, so I've learned a lot from all those, but in short for me, and this is what I tell every new leader, people won't follow somebody that they think doesn't care about them. And so the first thing I need you to do is I need you to give a shit about the people that work for you, that work for you. And I need you to care about the people we're policing. In fact, I just promoted a new deputy chief, and I said, I need you to really care about the people in the city. Like, I need you to really care. I need you that when we come to work and something bad happened to people, that you take that personally, because you know that there was something that maybe we could have done to protect that person, that you make sure that matters to you, and you make sure you care about these people and their families, even the people that don't necessarily may not care about you, or it doesn't matter. It's just you got to care about the people first. And no matter what, we treat everyone with respect. We value them as human beings. And then I have this other philosophy is, I hate when people say, treat people the way you want to be treated. Well, no, listen, I was in the military. I don't need a lot. I'm not going to treat you the way I need to be treated, because, it just may not fit for you, especially the difference in our ages and our generations. So I say, treat people the way they need to be treated. And to do that takes work, because you gotta know who they are and what drives them, what motivates them, what makes them happy, what triggers them. Because sometimes you need to, in this kind of work, you need to trigger them to get them. Okay, if I can't get you to, to willingly do it, you're going to do it. Yeah. Because this is important. And then as I continued, I started this thing, which is interesting, because I was talking about, like, I believe in the why. And, especially as these younger generations came in, people want to know, and they have a right to know. Sometimes you can't tell them, because sometimes, whatever the event is or the situation is, we don't have time for it. But people want to understand why you expect them to do something. And it's all about understanding the expectations. And so, we're doing this. And then I turned, and this is years ago, and I watch podcasts, and I listen to Simon Sinek talk about the why, and I'm like,
right. Yep.
Like, this is it. Like, these are my stories. Like, I love this guy. And I actually saw him in person.
Okay.
And to listen to him, and especially how it intersects with his connections with the military, even though he wasn't in the military.
Right.
And so that guy resonates with me and everything he says. And so I started showing those at briefing, and I kind of made a mandatory watching. I used to do mandatory reading, but I realized, I'd buy these books, like I'd buy like Gil Martin's book and Jack Enter's book, and then I'd reference it, and I realized nobody read it. So now I make them watch these podcasts, and
that's great.
If you can get something out of it. So look, I think, the leadership style, the way you treat people, depends on the moment, the situation, who you are, what your needs are, and what I want to get from you, right? And at the end of the day, I just want you to know that, I'll treat you fair, and I'll care about you. And I look at it this way, and this can sound demeaning, and I don't mean it to be, but maybe because I'm older, I feel comfortable saying this. I probably wouldn't, want to say it to somebody my own age, but I also tell new people, it's almost like it's being a parent. And I want you to think of these employees, these officers, as your family, as your kids, and I remember my older son used to complain because I made him come in earlier than anybody else. Yeah. And he used to say to me, I don't understand. Why do I have to come in early? Why do I have to be in at midnight when everybody else can stay out forever? We're seniors. And I said, all right, listen, I'm going to tell you why. Because I love you. And you can fill in the rest. And he just said, that's not an answer. But I didn't expect him to get it then. But I hope in later years, he said, especially when he became a parent, now I get it. So I kind of use that analogy. And I said, you've got to look at them, and you've got to make this, you can't just do what they want you to do. You have to do what's best for them. And we have to keep them safe. And so keeping the public safe is on the same line as keeping my officer is safe. And I'm not just talking physically safe. And we see what happens when people make mistakes, when people don't have the proper training or the proper guidance, and what it does to their lives and their careers. And not just them, what it does to their families. Like, you become a YouTube sensation and you don't have to be wrong. That can destroy you, especially with the way social media is. And so I don't want people to go through that. So we have to protect people from that, and to make sure that, we advocate for laws that we think help us get there, policies that get us there. And we've got to have control systems, whether people want it or not. They've got to know that, hey, look, people, if they get a chance to cut corners, at some point they are. Most people, right? Some people are inherently motivated. That's great, but we've got to help people do things to make sure they're doing it the right way. Not just because of results, not just because of outcomes, but because we're trying to develop men and women to be good, successful police officers, but we're trying to protect them. I don't know, if people understand that or know that. And I'm not going to say I don't care, because I hope they do, but in the end, they don't have to. That's what's important. And I can retire and leave this profession. It doesn't matter to me if somebody says, oh, he was great, he did everything I asked him to do. I hope that they say, I didn't always agree with him, but I know he cared about us, and I know he looked out for us. And that means more to me than certainly how many arrests you make, or outcomes. If you think back on people's careers, if I think back on you, and if I ask people about you, they're not going to talk about your outcomes. They're not even going to remember. They remember what kind of person you were. And I remember you always had a smile on your face, and you always seemed like you were happy to be there. And that, that's infectious for other people. That's great for the culture. Nobody remembers how many arrests you made. Nobody cares.
Right. Communicating the heart behind the why is always the tricky thing, right? It's very easy to say, oh, well, it's because I care for you. And for somebody who doesn't understand the whole picture, doesn't have all the pieces of the pie, they only see things through the lens of, what they can directly contact in the moment. Mm-hmm. Whereas a person in your position has to look at, here's a good police term for you, the totality of the circumstances, mm-hmm. right? And I think that'd be so hard to get people to see the big picture.
I don't actually go around telling people I care about them.
Right.
I hope they figure it out. And I hope that the subordinate, the managers that I have underneath me, between, the people, let's face it, we all exist for the men and women that are in a uniform in a patrol car, right? All of us, detectives, supervisor, we're all in support of them. Mm. And I hope that I'm developing supervisors, those mid-level managers that are carrying that message. And I hope they kind of figure it out on their own. It's kind of like this. When you were in the academy, we had drill instructors. And you may not remember this, but I say to every class, and I hope I said it to your class, I'm about to introduce you to your drill instructors. Their job is to condition your heart, your mind, and your body, and develop you into successful police officers. You won't like them. That's okay. But everything they do for a reason. Remember that. Everything they do for a reason. Some of you may understand that now. Some of you will likely understand it in a few months, and some of you may never understand it. And those that don't are going to have a very difficult 7 months. I know what their role is. I know their script.
Right.
And I'm there when we talk about how you guys are doing and what they're going to do for the day and what they're going to look for. And it doesn't matter if you think you're the sharpest tool in the shed, they're going to find something to correct, right, because they want to teach you attention to detail and they want to teach you accountability. Yeah. You don't get that, but I'll bet you got that at some point in the academy. They didn't need to come in and say, hey, we care about you.
Right.
But you figure it out on your own. Some do and some don't. At the end of the day, we have work that we have to do. We have important work. It's noble work. And we've got to get this work done. And my job is to get, these certain results. And I'm going to get those results. And I'm going to do that in a way that I hope I can motivate you. Mm-hmm. I hope I can encourage you. But we have to get those results.
First and foremost, I remember that speech exactly.
Oh, you do? Oh, that's great. Oh, wow.
Yeah,
that's great.
I do. And you were right. Turns out you were right. that 7 months changed my life in a lot of different ways. But I have a really good friend who's he was an ER doctor for a long time, kind of a second father figure for me. And he came to the graduation. And I remember him telling me, I was kind of like worried about this profession. Like, this is a dangerous profession to be going into. He goes, until I saw that ceremony. And he goes, and the way, the attention to detail, all the things you were just talking about, command presence, the way that things are done. Right. He said, I'm not worried. Like, that's the kind of training that you get.
When you come out of the academy, you're going to function in an environment, probably now more than ever, that's chaotic. Right. That's rapidly evolving. We have very little. First of all, whatever information we got to send you on that call is never 100% correct. Right. Right. It's never right. Yeah. You don't find that out until later on. And so you have to be able to function under stressful conditions with people saying things and yelling at you and criticizing you. And at the same time, in your mind, you're trying to say, what information do I have on this call? Is there a threat? Is there a violation of the law? Often it doesn't even have to do with, it could be homeless. It could be, and often they're EDPs. What's my training? How do I manage this? Your mind is going through so much. Yeah. You've got to be able to manage that. And you need to do that free of emotion, without getting emotional, without getting angry, without losing patience. When we implement that stress program in the academy, not in the classroom, right? That's a learning environment. That teaches you to shut out the noise and to focus on the things that are important. And I know some people don't understand it. It's, I believe in it. Plus, you also have to remember you're dealing in a profession where people expect you to be perfect, and no one's perfect. Right. And everyone's going to make mistakes. But if you make a mistake at a certain juncture and make the wrong call, and I can give you multiple examples, your life can change. Right. Yeah. And so that's what I mean about keeping people safe. We had an incident where 2 officers had to take somebody into custody that was fighting with them, and you can find it on YouTube. And he started to say, I can't breathe, and he was fighting with them. They immediately jumped into action, and they knew exactly what to do. And they sat him up, and they got him medical attention. They called immediately. They assessed him. They did everything they were supposed to do. If they had made one wrong move, if they hadn't turned him over, if they hadn't followed their training, the circumstances could have been far, far different. And so that's what I'm talking about when it comes to keep people safe. Right. That attention to detail, that words matter. When we tell you to do something, I can't always explain the why, but at some point, you'll have an experience like that, and you'll say, you know what? Yeah, I get it. The training is important. I do need to follow those rules. Yeah. Unlike, there's very few professions like this.
Yeah. We had such a good academy staff. I bought into that right away, and I knew the way that they would bring us statistics. Okay, here's why we take care of our uniform. Here's why we look squared away. There's a reason behind us. Here's the data. Here's a study of cop killers and what they looked for, or assaulting officers. And
remember all that.
That's from the academy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So attention to detail, responsiveness to stress, and being able to function. Is that something that people, because you hear a lot of people talking about, oh, the academy is a little bit too militarized, right? It's too rigid, it's too structured. And I am like the biggest component of the opposite. Yeah. Like, how are you supposed to understand and interact and come to some conclusion in the absolute top heightened stress, responses that you have if you don't train that way?
Absolutely. Look, there's an argument to be made for both sides, and I try to find a balance. But I can tell you what you mentioned stress response. I mean, that's important. We can teach you everything in the classroom. And that classroom is an adult learning environment. It needs to stay that way. I tell those drill instructors, I don't want you in the classroom. I don't know if they listen to me or not, and you're smiling, so they probably don't. But I don't want you in that classroom. I said, in fact, if you think about your experiences in college, you watch the clock and you're saying, I can't wait for this class to get over so I can get to my sanctuary out here. Well,
it's the opposite.
It's the opposite now. You don't look, we're good. We don't need a break. I know those drill instructors are outside waiting for me. I'll stay here in this classroom. But what we have found is we tried to ease up a little bit. We were starting to take some criticisms about creating warriors and not guardians, which is I disagree with. That's you have to be able to do both, and you've got to be able to transition to a warrior. It's just a big part of the job, and we have many examples of that. So we did an experiment where we changed things around a little bit, and it was right about the time that we got right before we got Virtua Simulator, as a matter of fact. And what we found is one of our top candidates, our top recruits academically, could not perform in practical skills, could not perform when we started implementing stress and we started saying, you need to do this, you need to do that. And she didn't survive. I say survive, she didn't last, right? So we need to kind of, we give you all this stuff, but until you get out there and until you start to apply that in a real life setting, it's very, very different, right? And so we have been successful. Our academy is the longest running satellite academy in the state. It's where everybody wants to send their people. It's like, we have more requests than we have seats. We have a reputation of developing the finest police officers, depending on what you send us in the beginning. But look, here's what the academy does.
Sure.
Everybody comes in, you come in with preconceived notions. You have no idea what you have inside. It's kind of like playing football in high school. You're going to find out what you really have inside. Sometimes you can go further and there's a lot more in the tank. And sometimes you're not as tough as you thought you were.
Right. Yeah.
Or as smart as you thought you were. And so it is kind of those seminal moments where you get to really look deep inside. And that's kind of one of the things we do. We'd rather find out in there in a training environment than in the field.
Well, I had situations too, and you couldn't have said that any better, where I didn't even have to think, my training kicked in. And that's how you know it's good training,
right?
Good.
Yeah.
That's how you know that the drill instructors and the, your defensive tactics instructors and everybody who's been teaching you did a good job.
Yeah.
And that's when you want to see it in practical application, because that's all that really matters.
Of course.
You can run scenarios in your head all you want, but at the end of the day, if the work hasn't been laid out beforehand,
right,
you're going to struggle.
Sure.
And the flip side to the coin too of, somebody having all the knowledge, but not having the practical skills under stress. Obviously there's the reverse to that too.
Of course. The most important thing that we do is in those classrooms, right?
Yeah.
The knowledge that we can put in your head, because that gives you the space to be creative.
Right.
And so that's really important. And that's why we have the testing
right.
Because we have had those situations where they're just a really good recruit and they're doing well in the practical skills and they're disciplined and they've got, the tools on the practical side, but they just can't absorb and understand, the most important part in that is the academic side, right?
Yeah. Well, you see those videos all the time, where a lawyer student, kind of schools a police officer in the way it should be. Well, that is a whole nother side of the warrior or the guardian that people don't associate necessarily with those words.
Right.
Where I think that it has to be all the things. If you're thinking of your quintessential police officer, well-rounded in all areas, emotionally intelligent, all of these, buzzwords. Right. If you can find a way to be intentional about getting better at all of those all the time,
right,
that is what I feel should really be the focus.
Absolutely. I tell people, use this, not this. Yeah. Don't rely on this, right? A lot of times when you do that, there's a failure. And so, we have kind of this different approach now. It's like if you weren't able to de-escalate and you had to use force, we want you to look at it. What is it that I could have done better? There may be nothing, but we want to dissect it. It's kind of like, and I use a lot of sports analogies, like if you played football, maybe you won Friday night, or in my case, we played Saturday morning, but Monday you were going to watch game film. And that it didn't matter what the score was, whether you won or lost. The coach is going to point out the blocks you missed, the passes you dropped. Because why? Because we want to get better. Is there a better way to do this? Like, could we? And we do the same thing. It's not the kind of thing where, hey, we're good enough. No, we need to always get better.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. There's no ceiling.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. You mentioned Virtua. Can you explain what Virtua is to anybody who doesn't understand?
So Virtua, it's a Virtua simulator, and in our case, it's a 300 degree. It's surrounded by 300 degrees of video wall, seamless video. Ours sits up on a sound stage. So you climb up into this stage, and there's all kinds of audio sensors underneath that send barking dogs, cars, voices. And we now have about 250 different scenarios where you go in, and these scenarios have been filmed by actors, by the company. And they have probably 20 different type of the same scenario can go in 20 different directions. And so one or two officers go up into this blackened sound stage, and they're surrounded by all this video. You got to be mindful and have awareness of everything around you, and not just tunnel vision dealing with this. And depending on your verbal skills or your tactical, really your verbal skills, they may make that person surrender. They make that person flee. They may make that person pull a weapon and fire shots at you. And so there's scenarios for emotionally disturbed people. There's scenarios for, in fact, there's any, shooting, a police shooting or shooting at any businesses. When you see these mass shootings, most of those have been recreated in Virtua. Mm-hmm. They've changed them a little bit, but if you look at Columbine, and if you look at, in Aurora at the shooting at the movie theater, mm-hmm. and so it shows you going in, and you're actually walking through that. It's about as real as you can get without being real.
Right.
And you're in that room alone. We induce a lot of stress in there, and
yeah.
we have, and then when we use that not just to train people, but when somebody has an event where they could have, de-escalated or they could have performed better,
take it if you need it.
We place them in there, we bring them down, and we spend about 2 to 4 hours on Virtua going through similar scenarios and trying to go over, hey, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? And how can we improve?
How valuable is that?
First of all, the equipment, when we got it, it was like $1 million piece of equipment. There's only 10 of them across the country. The military used it a lot. And so we made a deal with them. And I said, hey, what if we let you use our site as a demo site? And they gave us this great price. We share it with all the different agencies. And, you do active shooter training, but you do it once a year, and it's hard because you've got to get actors to come down, and some people know their role and they don't. This is something we can put people right on. Yeah. You're using the same weapon systems that you would normally use. It shoots out a laser instead of a bullet. So wherever that laser goes, that's where your bullet would go. And so it's not for tactical proficiency, but it's, some people describe it as like, the world's largest video game.
Right. Yeah.
And it's really sophisticated. It's amazing to have that, to be able to run people through that. And it's humbling too, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, I wouldn't have known about Virtua, I don't think before taking the job, but then going through it, like, man, it's just like you said, it's real life without being in real life.
Yeah.
It's like the most intense, realistic game.
Yeah.
But the downstream effects of playing scenarios in your head, acting them out in real time. And not only because what you just said, there are people behind you too, who are monitoring your response and then relaying the system to give responses based on what you're telling them. Sure. So if you are unnecessarily escalating something, then they'll show you bad. They'll make it go bad.
Yeah, it's real life, kind of like real life.
And vice versa.
Sure. I'll tell you a story about that. And it was after 2020, after George Floyd was killed, and there was a lot of focus on police accountability, and we were criticized for things that were happening in other parts of the country, tragic, but nothing that our officers were doing, but that's what happens, right? And you recognize it comes with the territory. So we brought people down. In fact, I had the U.S. Attorney's Office ask me, can we bring some people down? And so we were bringing in journalists, we were bringing in politicians, we were bringing in activists. And we were showing them how we train for use of force. And then we'd bring them in one by one in this Virtua. And it was very humbling, because anyone that's listening on this, if you have an opportunity to do a Virtua, and it doesn't, here's what we usually get. They usually fail. They usually get shot, or they shoot the wrong person, or they lose their temper, or they do nothing. And, the response I usually get, well, you have your training. And I remind them that police officers go through 7 months of basic training and have to learn hundreds and hundreds of topics.
Right.
So they're just generalists, and they're real learning, you start to apply those things in the field.
Right. Yeah.
But there's a lot of stuff that they expect us to know. and be perfect at it. That is impossible, right? So I tell people, well, I just gave you the same training, use of force class that we just gave to our police officers in the Recruit Academy. So it is realistic, and people will come out of there and say, and you can see there's some videos on YouTube where they've done similar things. Wow, that was humbling.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yep.
And you know, we still use every opportunity to bring folks in, to bring the public in and say, you know, this is what we go through. This is how hard it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is humbling. And I know those videos on YouTube you're talking about where they'll have an activist come in and who's been, you know, a staunch proponent of whatever it is.
Yeah.
And goes through something like that and kind of just when you put yourself in somebody's shoes in the same situations,
right?
How would you react?
Sure.
It's easy to say Monday morning quarterback or from, you know, a living room watching a video that you
right.
could have done better.
Right.
But until you put yourself in that situation,
right.
I had encouraged anybody. It's not very, maybe it's not super accessible, like all over the place to be able to go and do something like that.
It isn't, no.
But if you can,
right,
absolutely
take the opportunity.
Yeah.
And so when we do that, this isn't a gotcha moment, right?
Right.
It is, look, we are trying to understand the perspectives of our communities.
Sure.
And understand how you see the police and our actions through your lens.
Right.
Try to understand through our lens. And that helps us both better understand each other. And so that's what it does. So these things that we talked about, you'll never see them anywhere on YouTube. You'll never see them on the news because we don't want to embarrass anybody.
Right.
It's a way to kind of have that kind of mutual understanding of how difficult, you know, our roles are.
Yeah. And I think that the reciprocal nature of being able to take a step back and try to understand through the eyes of somebody who does that every day, super important. And vice versa. I think for officers too, like there's lots of resources. There's lots of people to talk to. There's lots of things to listen to try to understand what somebody might be going through, maybe like you did when you were a child. Okay, so that's a good segue into kind of technology. And you guys are on the forefront of some of the technological movements in policing. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, we've been looking at some of these things that are kind of forward-looking for years. I actually got invited to speak in Dubai, and then I was as a result of that, they gave me 3 days at a World Policing Summit, and so I listened to and I went to the drone section. And I said, okay, we use drones, right? Most departments have drones where you take them out of the back of your car, you throw them up, and you use the controller and you watch, you know, you can see where it's going and we use them effectively. We've used those for years. But this is different. This is drone as first responder, where drones are being used. You fly them autonomously and beyond visual line of sight. And so I went there and I'm listening to like Dubai and Singapore talk about, you know, their programs. And, you know, this is an open society and it's a little bit different than some of these other countries and other cities. You know, we have privacy concerns and whatnot, but, you know, they're using things like video cameras in all their public spaces, which we have mostly in, you know, in the United States as well.
CCTV.
And that's been common since 9/11. And they equip them with AI facial rec. So they'll see like, hey, you're wanted, that person's wanted, and the drone will go out there. And so I saw some of these things and it was, you know, more than we would tolerate in this city. But I thought about it. I said, you know, there's room for something scaled down. And so when we came back, we started looking at, you know, who's doing this. And Chula Vista was doing it. Oklahoma City was doing it.
Okay.
And
this is a pretty big police department.
All big police departments. And there was a smaller department, Elk Grove, that had just started, you know, after we had started looking at this for about a year. And so we started working with this company called Skydio, and they're now a partner with Axon. You know, Axon's the big gorilla, right? And so we looked at what Axon had, Skydio had, and we looked at what Fleet had, right? These companies. And so we did 2 things. We implemented a DFR program, a drone as first responder. We got pilots trained to be able to fly under the FAA regulations beyond visual line of sight, which is a special program for law enforcement. And so we have these docks. We have 2. We're getting a 3rd very soon, where the dock will house the drone. It charges the drone. The mechanicals are in there to control the drone. And so it's a drone. It opens up. The drone takes off autonomously and goes to a call. and then can return autonomously. Now,
Wow.
but let me, yeah. So
It's like a sci-fi movie.
it kind of is, but there's the hardware piece, and then there's the connectivity piece, and then there's the software that drives the train.
Okay.
That's what makes this different. So we have a drone pilot, and the idea is to get this drone on station within seconds. So, you monitor live with 911 even before the officers are dispatched. And that drone is heading out there on a straight, as the crow flies, straight line, no traffic, flying usually at an altitude of around 200-300 feet. Okay. So high enough where it's not, the noise isn't bothering anybody. And you get to that call. But it's not every call, because I don't think the public's ready for that.
Sure.
Critical incidents, incidents where, there's a robbery or a burglary or shots fired or an officer needs help or something that we need to get eyes on that quickly. Anything that it'll benefit the police officer to have eyes to understand that situational awareness. Anything that if we can get eyes on it quickly that can make the public safer, including apprehending people and that would otherwise escape. Searching for missing kids and missing folks that have wandered off, and vulnerable folks. Doing searches on the water, as you know, we in the summertime we have a lot of distressed boaters, swimmers, overturned kayaks, and we're always sending boats out there. Well, now, if we have a boat in the water, you still have to get there.
Sure.
And if we don't have a boat in the water, we got to get to the boat,
right,
and get out there. We got drones there in seconds, in minutes. So there's a lot of applications for it. And we've been really successful at finding people from, the bird's eye view that have escaped, that are escaping our perimeter. And we just had a great one where there was a stolen car. It hit off one of the license plate readers. The officers were dispatched. Guy bails out, runs into these yards. The officer set up a perimeter, but only 3-sided because there was water on the other side. Next thing you know, he escapes out of the perimeter. The drone's following him, watching him go in the water. So we're able to, locate people and apprehend people that we otherwise would go undetected.
Yep.
So there's a number of applications, but the way the DFR program works is it goes up and goes right to that location. It may be the officer's car. It may be the officer's body cam, or it's likely where that call's coming in, that 911 call came in. But we put it together under one single pane of glass with a real-time information center. It's kind of unique for an agency our size. So we've got our license plate readers here. We've got all our video cameras here. And so as the drone goes up and, we can see that stolen car, that wanted person hit off those license plate readers. We know where that car is. We see a image of that car. We pull up our video cameras that are in that area. We see the car in the area going by. We can track it. And then as the officers are arriving, we can turn streaming on their dash cams and on their body cams. So you put all this stuff in a single pane of glass, and what's really important is we send that drone feed to that officer in the field. So that officer in the field is getting it on his or her cell phone going, okay, this is safe. All right, that person's not armed. All right, I see where they're located.
Yeah,
we put it all together.
What an incredible resource. Think about, you have a bird's eye view of a hot call. Right. For officer safety reason, for public safety reason, what an immense benefit. I just recently heard about the live streaming thing from the dash cam and from the body cam. And I was thinking genius. Yeah. Because now your command center now is able to see in real time what's going on. It's not through a radio. It's not just through, because it was exclusively radio transmissions, right?
Sure.
Before that.
Sure.
So to be able to see in real time if somebody is in distress, radios get knocked off. Right. Sometimes you can't get to your radio and you're in distress. And man, that's just amazing. Yeah. The fact that it can, a while back I had my brother-in-law he actually started this podcast with me before he started a business, and he's too successful. So he was talking about, they should have drones on the car, just spitballing fun ideas. It just kind of comes up and then it follows the officer around because that technology's out there. Right. And then I heard about this program. I'm like, it's a good medium too because now you have the ability to decipher when it gets sent out. Right. Right. Which I would imagine for privacy reasons and concerns from the public is important.
It is. And so The pilots are mostly supervisors, and we have some senior patrol officers, but you always need supervisory approval to get it out there. Look, it's a light. These drones are small; they're about yay big, but it's still a small aircraft, right? It's still like a flying robot, and if that thing falls out of the sky, it can hurt somebody, and you're still dealing with it's a piece of machinery. And there's flaws, right? You can have a broken rotor, or the battery could die, or it's affected by the wind or the rain. And so, I mean, it has a parachute in case it does fall, but you want to make sure that you're making good decisions when you send it out. And while you can argue that it may be beneficial at every call, it's not where there's a possibility. It's where there's a probability that it could help out. And so you want to be judicious when you're making those decisions. And so we are. And we also are concerned about people's privacy. One of the things that we insist, in fact, the manufacturer, it's built into this software, is that drone flies with a forward-facing camera, so it's not looking down on your in your yard. Right. It gets there, and then once it reaches on station, then it tilts down. But the software, the AI that controls these things, New York City's using them. We're the first department in the state to have that, and we went down to watch New York City. Now, New York City has them, and they're flying in and out of skyscrapers because AI can determine that flight path.
Sure.
You can geofence towers and buildings, and one of the things that we
obstacle avoidance.
Obstacle avoidance, right? We make sure it doesn't fly over like highways. If there's a Route 1 or if there's 95, we want it flying adjacent. We don't want it flying over, because if it does fall. Right. It's like, it's got a parachute, but it's still like getting hit with a 25-mile-an-hour baseball, right? It's still got an impact.
Sure.
But yeah, it's the future. And, we took what these larger cities were doing and we scaled it down to us. And we've had some great results, and I tell you, there was another driving force was that what happened in Bristol. And so I thought about if we ever, and we lost Danny Watson, we lost an officer that was shot and killed. And so I want to make sure that if we have something where there's a possible threat, I want that drone to show up before those officers get there and say, I don't see a threat. And then the drone can come right back. If it saves one life, whether it be a police officer or whether it be the public, or, it takes somebody off the street that, was going to do harm, it's paid for itself.
Yeah. Other applications too. I mean, for anybody who doesn't know, a couple of officers in Bristol, Connecticut were ambushed, right? It was a domestic call, I believe. Yeah,
it was a domestic call. They were ambushed and they were both killed. And, what it did to that department and to law enforcement. And so when something happens, you always look at it and say, is there anything that I might be able to do if that happens here, right? I think anytime you see anything, you got to look at it and dissect it and say, how would we handle that? And, that was just a, tragic situation.
Yeah. Also the applications for, like you were saying, missing persons or suspect detection, anything like that, especially with the capabilities of cameras, to go infrared, to go all those other things.
Right.
I would imagine if it hasn't already, is it already in place?
It's already in place. It's been in place since June. Yep, okay. Operational.
Okay. So I'm sure that it's already becoming that net positive, that's saving lives.
Yeah.
I would like to move just real quick to some of the challenges facing law enforcement and recruitment, and I guess retention. I guess I'm not the best example sitting here. But
I should be interviewing you.
Yeah. What is that like in a leadership position to be facing that?
That's a good question. And I know my colleagues around the state would say it's the biggest challenge facing law enforcement in Connecticut. And from my understanding, it's the biggest challenge facing law enforcement nationwide. And it really happened after 2020. We were 10 years ago, we were getting 700, 500 people. And now, we're getting far less than that. And I worry not just in the numbers, but on the quality, like who really wants to do this job? Are they doing it because they really want to say, hey, stand behind this line, I got you.
Right.
Or is it just, hey, it's a good paying job. I get good benefits. Like, What's their motive? And that's okay too, because we'll develop into good police officers. But so I wonder, right? A couple of things have happened. There's generational influences that say, look, my work-life balance is more important. Sure. I get that. I respect that. I don't want to work weekends. I don't want to work nights. I don't want to work holidays. I don't want to work double shifts. My family's more important. Isn't that the way it should be?
Right.
I mean, it really is. And so I admire that. And so you're talking, and I think nurses are seeing some of the same things because some of the shift work. And so you're dealing with that, but you're also dealing with, I don't want to work in a job where I'm not going to be comfortable, a job where I'm not going to feel appreciated. And I think what 2020 did is it was the way it was the atmosphere. I'll go into a protest, and I work in a great, great city with, a great political structure, a great community. I think I'd say the same for the state, and really supportive of law enforcement. But it was different back then. I mean, there were, some of the things that people went through, and I think you're starting to see, or you're still seeing some of the, the collateral damage, right? Young people that were reading on social media, watching on TV, watching these protests, hearing the criticisms of police, and they're now grown, and they don't want to be police officers because they didn't have that impression that the police were the knight in shining armor, that hero, right? So less people are interested in law enforcement for those reasons. And then you have the COVID effect to whatever influence that has, is another matter. But trying to recruit people with a limited number of people for an entire state, we're all competing against the same people, it's become really tough. And so here's kind of what our focus is, and here's what the research has shown. You want to have an agency where people feel they're comfortable. You want to have an agency where people feel they can do meaningful work and feel productive, right? You want all those things, and they want opportunities, and I think we offer all that. So I think it's always been a good culture, right? Culture is important, but not everybody wants a culture that's disciplined and has accountability. Some people want easy. I don't want those people. But what we're finding is a lot of it has to do, because it's so competitive, like anything else, it starts to look at who's paying the most, who's offering the best benefits, who's offering the most days off.
Right.
And so we looked at that, and we started looking at state research and national research. And those things, do have a considerable impact. So what we just did is our elected officials just voted to have a dramatic increase in pay. And these guys just got a pretty good pay increase. They've got a schedule where they're working 5 on 3 off. They're getting 30 more days off a year. So even if you're new, you're rotating and getting a piece of the weekend very often.
Right.
And so we're trying to appeal to young people that want more time off, more flexibility, and we're trying to compete with departments that are paying more. Now, we're still not the most, we're in the middle, but we think we have enough to offer that being in the middle is good enough. We saw in 4 months, we recruited people for 4 months, saw a certain number. 10 days after this contract was settled, it doubled in 10 days. And so, look, if that's a motivator, it's like any other profession. You've got to be able to compete.
Yep.
And I don't blame people for saying, look, I want to go where I can feel comfortable, but where I can, best support my family. So makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine all the different variables there. My generation and the generation after me is very different than your generation, my father's generation. Like it would have, if like my grandfather worked at the same place for 30 years, never asked for a raise.
Right.
And that's kind of what it was. And I don't know if it's an awakening. I don't know how you want to say it, because there's a lot of good qualities to both approaches, but it's been very much a transition to family, time spent,
right.
Risk reward, whereas future generations just didn't do that so much. No. And then you add on a global pandemic, you add on civil unrest,
right,
and all of these things, and you can understand how that would affect recruitment. I can't even imagine being in that position. So in order to get to a place where you had to look around and say, okay, what is everybody else doing who maybe has, who's recruiting well or is competing with us? How can we adapt to that? And everybody would know absolute last thing you want to do is lower your standards. You just can't do that.
Right.
In this profession, you can't do that.
Because when people come on, they're making an investment in the future, however long that's going to be.
Right.
And it's, at some point, it's going to show its head, right? If you are hiring people that aren't suitable for this job, you're taking on problems, and it's not fair to the next generations of police. It's not fair to the residents. And so, look, it's, we're dealing with taxpayer money, so it's always a sensitive issue. But I think the first responsibility of government is to keep people safe. And we've shown, our agencies all over the country have shown what they can do with good people. You can have great leadership, but if you don't have good people and that are willing to follow, culture's so very important. But let's not forget that young people, they have needs, and and you know what? They're not afraid to tell you what their needs are. I actually admire that,
Right. It's
they won't let it, you don't take advantage of young people because,
right.
They're on top of it.
Yeah. I want to move, kind of as we're getting ready to wrap up here. I wanted to talk a little bit about law enforcement officer and mental health side of things. When I was on, I want to think it was only a couple of years, I had like this feeling of, I moved down here. It was just me. I didn't have any friends, any family down here. So that was kind of tough for me. Yeah. And for a year or so, I had felt like when I would get off shift, I would just crash. And then kind of, it was kind of up and high. And then you guys brought in Dr. Kevin Gilmartin and absolutely just changed my life.
Great, right? Yeah.
Oh my goodness. The way that people don't understand that side of law enforcement, I think, is something we should always try to do better. And I've talked on the podcast about this before. The downstream effects of alcoholism and divorce and suicide and all these things that are heightened in law enforcement, I think, can be drawn back a lot to what he talks about. Just the heightened mental state while you're at work, and when you come home, it doesn't just go to baseline. It usually dips below. Right. And I remember thinking like, oh, well, maybe that's the thing. His prescription was kind of, you need to get up and go and do things. You need to get up and go to your child's soccer game when you're tired. You need to go to the gym. You need to do things, and changed my life. Yeah. And for the next 4 years, I felt like I had such a good hold on that. Sure. So is that something that you see? Forget all the external factors, forget social pressure, forget what's happening in the news, forget, what politics and all of that stuff. That part of it, is that something that you see officers struggling with? So,
one thing unique about police officers is they don't like to share. And so you've got to watch out for them. And, I put a lot of focus on nonverbal and try to see how, I'll give you for instance, I recall you walking by briefing or stopping in briefing, you always had a smile on your face. And if you stopped, if that smile disappeared and I started seeing you angry or sitting off to the side, that tells me something's going on, either internally or something in your life. And there's one thing that I'm sure you don't know, most people don't know, is that I've had people in my office, dozens of people in my office, telling me things that I'll never repeat to anyone else. But people struggle. And what I find is people, most of the time, they're struggling about something that happens outside. They're not struggling about the actual work. Once in a while, and we're big on making sure that we have mental health debriefings and mental health assessments and something that's obviously traumatic, right? Something happens with a child. I know there was a situation with a dog attacked an infant. And the officers that went out there were really broken up. And we've had many incidents like that. And so those, you say, okay, this, for any average human being, this is traumatic. Let's try to address that and get in front of that. But it's those other things. And so most of the time when I have people coming to see me or calling me, and I've had people come to my house and, nobody will ever know who they are, but they're having problems in their personal life, and the job doesn't, sometimes makes it much harder because you're coming to work with your mind full of all this stuff that's happening in your personal life, or maybe there's a health issue with your kids or your parents, and now you've got to clear your mind and do this job where you've got a ton of stuff up here, like we talked earlier about all these things going on, trying to assess, it's really not the physical grinds of the job, or that you had a, somebody resisted arrest, or you had those things, you just kind of dust off and you're like, okay, that's part of the job. It's
on to the next one.
Right. On to the next one. But it's all those other things. And so, I think that's kind of where I see people impacted the most. And so, mental health awareness is something that is still fairly new. I mean, it's been around, for a decade, but we didn't really focus on those things before. Your private life was yours. We take you on, and we take all of your struggles, your baggage that you may have. And, while we have the resources, we provide resources to you. You have to make somebody has to want to identify. We lost, if you recall, we lost an officer to suicide, and we were all shocked. Let me back up. Most of us were shocked, but somebody knew, right? Somebody had to know that he was struggling inside, because you never would have known on the outside. And I think when you see situations like that, everybody recalibrates.
Right.
And starts keeping a better eye on people. I can tell you this, if you think that the chief of police is going to be able to solve all these problems, you're going to be disappointed. It's really the people to the right and people to the left that work with them every day. And that's what we try to tell people. Hey, and we do get that quite a bit. I had an officer that was struggling on working a certain shift, and somebody came to me and said, hey, this person's having a really hard time. And I thought, wow, you've never come to me before and told me this. This is huge, right? This is powerful. This person must really be struggling. And we called the person, and the person was. And so we had to make some adjustments. So it's, what do we do when we don't know? How do you identify? All we can do is make it as easy as possible and encourage people to say, hey, look, we can help you. You can trust us. We can protect, your confidentiality. So there's so many resources out there, both on an official level and on an unofficial level. But again, I put a big premium into kind of that nonverbal and see how people are doing. And usually it's like, hey, how's so-and-so doing? Or maybe talk to them. I think if people look back and they'll say, well, how come that officer got this assignment? Or why was that officer assigned to this shift? Or, why is an officer allowed to take more time off? Well, there's probably a pretty good reason, because we're working with somebody to try to manage kind of the struggles that they're going through.
That kind of goes to the point of not having the full picture,
right.
And perhaps somebody who said, why is that person getting this? Why is that? Well, there may be reasons for that you don't understand.
Right.
And I deal with this in business all the time too, is when you start to assume intent, you've lost.
Right.
And that's just
right.
As clear as it gets.
You don't know what that person's intent is. You don't know what's going on in their life. If you want to assume intent, assume a positive intent. Start there and then work your way down.
Yeah.
Don't start at the bottom.
We had CEO on within the first 5 episodes, Carrie Herbine, who's now a hospital CEO in Kentucky, I think it is. And it's exactly what he said. He said, as soon as you start to assume negative intent, number one, you're almost always wrong.
Right.
And number two, start from a positive place.
Yeah.
And where that gets tricky in leadership is that you're balancing systems and processes also with a functioning organization that has to run well.
Right.
It just does. The public, relies on you. Your officers rely on you. So as soon as you start to look into why people are maybe doing something, you have to check your heart first.
Yeah.
And see if you're coming at that from a positive lens.
Right.
But I think Dr. Kevin Gilmartin brought up it was another country. It must have been Australia maybe, or somewhere that after a certain amount of time sends their officers on like a hiatus or whatever it was. And I think that going 5 to 3 like that, 5 days on, 3 days off, game changer. Because now you're rotating, I guess, the days off,
Right.
to some extent, which matters
Right.
to officers.
Right. Of course.
But also I think it's just the nature of that job requires some decompression and focus on other things.
Right.
Not just what you see on a daily basis or what it is. Probably I'm coming at this from like when I had left, it was post George Floyd, post COVID. It was a lot of stress.
Right.
But before that, I don't think that I would have felt like the job was too in my face. Luckily I was able to kind of shut it off when I went home. And I know a lot of officers can't do that.
Right.
I have friends in other agencies in other states who it was like when they would come off, they just ruminate constantly, and it had health effects on their lives and stuff like that. So that 3 days seems genius. Was that something that you had thought about before, or was it something other agencies were doing?
Well, so only one other agency that we're familiar with in the entire state does a 5-3, and they used to be 5-2, 5-3. But we went from a straight 5-2 to a 5-3. That was a big ask for the city.
Sure.
But I got to tell you, I went to our elected officials. I went to our police commission. I went to the mayor and the board of aldermen all separately. And when I explained to them the reasons that we had just discussed, they were all on board 100%. It's going to be costly and it's going to be difficult to manage, but they understand the importance of it. That's one thing about working where I work. It's a great community that's really supportive of law enforcement. And they are because they trust what we tell them.
Right.
And I don't ever want to lose that trust because we'll never get it back.
Mm-hmm. Especially in the social media climate, the quick response to everything. You lose that trust one time. It's not just we'll get it right back.
Right.
It's like we'll get it back in like 20 years.
Right.
Right. So I imagine that factors in for sure. Last thing I want to talk about quick, physical fitness.
Right.
This is something that you can see sometimes online, an officer who's very out of shape trying to wrestle somebody or somebody who's not physically capable. This is something that I feel like when we were in the academy was just drilled into us. Like, this is important. Is that something that you've always adopted? I mean, is it, obviously it's important, but I don't know that every agency tackles this the same way. They
don't. And not every recruit academy tackles it the same way. No, I believe in it personally. It started with my military background. I'm an avid CrossFitter. My son owns a CrossFit gym. I go there every day.
Yep.
Love it. And
shout out.
Yeah, shout out. I didn't say the name though. So CrossFit started with the military, and it's such a functional form of fitness. And then it started to, take hold at police departments out west, and it became somewhat of then it started to come out east. And because it's kind of a complete workout, that's part of our academy program. And I know a lot of folks will say, well, the chief's a CrossFitter, so, he loves working on CrossFit, so he makes us do it. No, it's like, it's been adopted it works for the military, it works for police departments. Lifting weights is great. I mean, maybe it makes you look great, but I've seen a lot of guys that lift a lot of weights and look really strong, and, they can't run, they can't perform, and they tap out really quickly. And at the end of the day, we're teaching, the Gracie form of defensive tactics now. We've changed that up as well. And when we do that and we stay fit, we're seeing great success with some of our smaller officers who may not have the physical strength, that know how to grab hold and hold on, until help arrives, or to disarm somebody. It's you're not in a fight. You don't throw your hands up and get in a fight. That's not what we do. That's not what we want to do. That looks worse.
Right.
But I can show you examples of videos of officers, just, smaller officers taking, larger suspects down. And I think it's effective, and it's in their performance, but it instills confidence, and you're less likely to use, improper force or go to, or step up to a higher level of force when you don't have to. So we put a lot of focus and a lot of emphasis on that and on physical fitness. And it comes back to not just, I'll give you one other quick story. I was a captain. I'm driving in my cruiser. I'm coming back from the gym and I see these two, I won't tell you the cities, but two cities go right past me. Boom, boom, chasing a car. I go around the corner on, this was 91, 95. And I see the two cruisers stopped and I see there was a car in front of them. And it had crashed, and both cruisers got their doors open, lights and siren are going. You know, I put it in park. I go out, I look in, I shut their doors, and I go running into the woods, and I hear a shot go off. And so when I get into the woods, I encounter the first officer who was extremely overweight, and he had his hands on his knees, and you know, he was struggling to breathe. And I just said, you know, where are they? And he just pointed, and I ran into the woods, and there was this other officer who chased this suspect down and grabbed him. And all I could think about was, you know, what if that officer was shot? What if that officer was hurt? You have an obligation in this job, and I don't mean to offend anyone, but let's face it, if you want to be an effective backup, you need to be able to perform, and you need to be right alongside that other officer. That resonated with me, and it just made me double down that fitness is important. We have an obligation. You know, the military, you know, they take their annual fit test and they stay fit because it's an important part of their job. Now, you know, those, you can say that physical fitness isn't as important as it once was because we're using more of this.
Sure.
However, there's still a component that unfortunately we'll never get away with, you know, we'll never get away from. So yeah, no, I think fitness is important, and I think it's good for the mind, and especially as you start to age, it's important to kind of, you know, stay fit. And so we're big on health. It's not just mental health, it's also physical health. You know, when we're looking at the whole human being and we're trying to develop you, why would we not develop your physical fitness when we're working so hard on your mental fitness as well?
I think too, with any field that, is so consequential, right? So when you're looking at law enforcement, the stakes can often be pretty high, and the public deserves you to be at your best. Your coworkers deserve for you to be at the best and expect you to be at your best. And you know that the archetypal, you know that when an officer comes on scene immediately, how reassuring that is or unreassuring that is, right? So one of the parts of, I was on one of the midnight squads, and it was actually Lieutenant Roger at the time. We
Sharp
very
guy.
much
Real sharp guy.
Yeah. We very much had the feeling of when our buddies showed up, we were good.
Right.
You know, and you don't want to be the person who shows up and people are like, well, I guess it's just me.
Yeah. Right.
You know, and in the situation running through the woods there, and you can see those all over YouTube. You know, the public deserves that. And so
exactly. How are you really going to protect somebody? I mean, I think you're incomplete if you don't really focus on that physical fitness. You know, I won't mention it, but I can think of two very critical incidents that I was involved with, and I think I know my fitness helped me through, especially on one of them. And you know, part of that is endurance. You don't have to do CrossFit, any type of functional training where you're training not just, you know, your strength, but working on, you know, overall strength and overall fitness, right? I think that's really important because, you know, some of these things go on for a while, and especially like on the midnight shift, you know, help could be far away, right? Because you usually have less officers there. So yeah, absolutely.
Did you see once you guys started instituting like jujitsu into curriculum and stuff like that, did you see a difference in use of force?
Well, we actually saw a reduction in use of force just in general.
Right.
And I think it had a lot to do with the way we kind of look at force and how it's absolutely necessary. So we started to see that. Plus, I think when we started seeing like improvements in, you know, in communication ability and de-escalation ability. So I think that was a positive thing. But what we're seeing with use of force is it's over quickly, and there's far less injuries to the police officers, far less injuries to suspects and arrestees. And so those are positive results all the way around.
That's what you want. That's
what you want.
The ultimate goal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the more that you can focus on that stuff, and this is a testament to you and your command staff and the academy. I know that you guys we were talking about de-escalation before it seemed like it was mainstream popular.
We were. Yeah. I'm glad you remember that. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I just think that it's a testament to who you are. Obviously, the department moves in a conscientious manner that seems like when I talk to you and when I see your department progressing forward is your vision. So that's just for you. What do you do for fun?
You know, I have two granddaughters now that are, you know, I think I mentioned to you before we got on that, you know, I have two boys, and I never thought I could love two human beings as much as I love my two boys. But
right.
I hope my boys aren't going to listen to this, but I could actually go right to the granddaughters. I could have skipped, you know, it's like these girls are just my heart.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, I love them. And it's, you know, I work out, you know, fitness is a big part, but, you know, I always tell people, you know, we work so we could live. And,
right.
you know, I got to be honest, I'm probably one of those people that live to work a little too much, but I really enjoy the work. It's like I'm, you know, kind of obsessed with it. And I've had some great opportunities. I work with some tremendous people. Like, you know, every time I think, and I've had many opportunities to do other things in the private sector and even some other chief's jobs, but, you know, I'm flattered that they want me to stay, so I stay, but I just really like working with cops. Like some of the finest people you'll ever meet are police officers, you know, and the things that they, you know, they believe and they want to do. Like, I really enjoy that. And, so yeah, that's, you know, this job is my passion, and maybe a little too much, but, love to travel, do some outside consulting, do some international stuff. And, before COVID, I was, you know, on a plane about 250,000 miles a year.
Wow.
That stopped after COVID.
Yeah.
Clients kind of dried up, but I dabble in some of that. But I guess a lot of it revolves around work.
All your hobbies are
a little too much,
except for the granddaughters.
Yeah. So, to advice to any new police officers, work-life balance, and you know, please focus more on the things that are really important. You know, outside of work, don't have that singular identity, as Kevin Martin said. I will say, you know, after having said everything I've said about work, I don't think I've ever missed a practice or a ball game or a hockey game or anything for my boys.
And that's what matters.
That's what matters.
Because that's what will be remembered.
You don't get a do-over.
No.
You don't get a do-over. Family first always. I tell everybody that. Family first.
Yeah.
In fact, I think my guys know if they want some special consideration and time off and they can't get it, you know, they come and go, well, my daughter or my son, I go, you give it to them. I'm starting to realize that. Yeah. But
that is so true though. And especially like my girls are little, you don't get that time back at all.
You never get,
when they're older, like I feel like 15 and older, like they're kind of becoming adults, and then they're adults forever.
Right.
But like you get them little one time.
That's it.
And so as much as I can be around, I'm going to be around.
Good for you.
Did you, you had boys, you had two boys.
Two boys.
You don't know what you don't have, right? That's what they say.
Yeah.
The two girls that are granddaughters now, isn't it like, is it totally different?
Totally different.
Okay.
Totally different.
Yeah.
And, you know, just totally different. We always wanted, I always wanted a girl.
Okay.
I was glad I have a boy. Boys, don't get me wrong. I don't know if they'll listen, but I always want to see what it was like to have daughters. And now I have the next best thing with granddaughters. And
you kind of get to do that, kind of like a whole new reset back into, and you get to give them back to the parents at the end of the day. So it's like,
you know what?
Perfect.
Like, I don't want to give them back.
Okay, good.
Like, I'll hold on to them.
That's the right answer, by the way.
You know, it's interesting. You know, my first name is Keith, but no one knows that because I'm either Chief or Poppy. I'm not even Dad anymore. Even my boys call me Poppy, right? And so I love that.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. Yeah. Well, look, I got something here for you. This is a little gift basket from one of our partners. It's some coffee in there. That's Colombian roasted.
Big coffee drinker.
Are you?
Oh, big coffee drinker.
Perfect. Yeah. Enjoy that.
I will. I definitely will. I appreciate that.
I can't thank you enough. You actually don't know the impact that you specifically had on my life coming down. And, you know, you guys took a big chance on me, and I feel like you invested a lot into me. Even the first few years, all of the different things I got to do and, you know, ways that I was being steered and the personal growth that I had, I won't be able to repay that.
Well, I appreciate that. And, you know, I've never talked about, and I mentioned that earlier, about myself. Like, I'll talk about work stuff, but, and I've turned these down before, but I I saw what you're doing, and I wanted to help you out, and I wanted to give something back to you. So that's why I came here. And if you ever want to invite me back in the future, I'd be happy to come. And
absolutely,
yeah, absolutely. And if you're ever interested around and you want to see our real-time center and see that drone, and you know, you could even attach it to one of your podcasts if you want. If you're ever doing a story like that,
100%.
Be happy to do that for you. All right.
Awesome.
All right.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, a pleasure, man.
All right.
Good
That's
seeing
it.
you again. All right.
See you, folks.